Welcome back to the Megyn Kelly Show, here to discuss the Clinton campaign's alleged spying on Donald Trump's campaign and on him while he was in the White House, as well as many other items in the news. My pal, Victor Davis Hanson, the Martin and Ely Anderson Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution. Victor, thank you for being back on. What a day. This Durham bombshell is significant. Again, unconfirmed. These are allegations and a report that he is getting ready to say that, or is pursuing claims that the Clinton campaign attorneys paid a tech company to infiltrate Donald Trump's campaign headquarters at Trump Tower and the executive office that he held in the White House, his computers, wanting to create a connection with Russia, hoping to find a connection with Russia, and if none existed, hoping to create a narrative that one nevertheless existed. Just a little bit more. This is the Daily Wire's Cabot Phillips did a good job explaining this today. This goes back to a meeting that the Clinton campaign lawyer Michael Sussman had with the FBI back in 2016, 2 months before the election. Sussman's been indicted for lying to the FBI, saying, "I have no client. I'm just here to give you information about Donald Trump's connection to Russia." Meanwhile, it turns out he did have a connection. He worked for the Hillary Clinton campaign. Didn't disclose it. So he's already been charged with that. But more information appears to be coming out of Sussman. Durham now says Sussman presented information to them, and that Sussman was working with a tech executive to obtain this data from Trump in very sketchy ways. That they infiltrated data from Trump's private residence during the campaign, and then after the campaign hacked into the executive office, trying to dig up dirt on Trump, and if none existed, to create it. So what do you make of this? And, you know, the one layer deeper on the Durham investigation into what Hillary was up to when Trump was running and sitting as president.
Yeah, I think we go back to the times that it explains how audacious they were. Because remember that Durham is just basically saying, well, you billed them and you actually said alpha on your charge, that you charged, you were working for Perkins Coie, and I guess you charged the DNC, who was being, funded with the Hillary campaign money. So it's pretty evident that they felt that they were exempt from any scrutiny. Another really bothersome angle to that, Megyn, is that the FBI seems to be almost in cahoots with the Clinton campaign, but because this was seeded and the FBI was investigating, and we know that the FBI at one time paid Christopher Steele as an informant, even though that wasn't their idea. They were put on to Christopher Steele by people within the DNC or Perkins Coie via Glenn Simpson, etc. So it also raises this question, and this is all in light of the Hunter laptop and the going after James O'Keefe, that what is the FBI doing now? It seems to be a retrieval or an auxiliary of the DNC and Democratic candidates. That's bothersome. And then the other thing is Donald Trump, we all, and I shouldn't say we all, but the country considered him unhinged when he said that they've been wiretapping me or putting wires up, and everybody said, what an archaic way of thinking. He's paranoid. And he apparently had been tipped off because, remember, he moved out of Trump Tower, or he ceased communicating. I went back just when I heard this story also, Megyn, just a final thought, and I was amazed at how many people, the New York Times especially, but also the Washington Post and major columnists, that kept getting angry that this was not leading to a conviction, or this was not being a scandal that would destroy the transition of Trump or even the presidency. So nobody has come out and said, I'm sorry that we published accounts of this and we took the FBI and basically Mark Elias seeding the media. Nobody's ever said, it's just as they've never renounced Christopher Steele. So, and I don't think they ever will either.
Mm-hmm. Correct. They haven't. They're still standing by him. And even Adam Schiff is coming out and saying, well, they'll deal with him in the court as appropriate. But, why should we have had questions about him? He came forward, seemed like a legitimate guy. Really? There were a lot of questions about him right from the get-go, even to, regular reporters. Never mind if you're Adam Schiff. So you raise a really interesting point. If this was happening, because what they seem to be alleging is that there was a contract with an outside tech firm to run servers and monitor servers that were being used inside the White House. And that whoever this so-called unnamed tech executive is, instead of just doing that, actually started mining data and farming it off to some university researchers with the goal of finding dirt that would show Trump had a connection with Russia that was somehow illicit while he was the sitting president. And so that, whatever, he kept doing that. Now, the question is, if that were happening, wouldn't our intelligence officials have known about it? Wouldn't the FBI know if that were happening to a sitting president, never mind prior when he was running, when it was just the campaign? And why wouldn't they, Victor, have raised it with Trump, with the president at the time when it was going on?
Well, I think the answer to that, Megan, your second question is found in something James Comey said when he met in a private conversation with the President of the United States as the director of the FBI. And he assured the president that he was not the object of an ongoing FBI investigation, which he knew to be untrue that he was. And second, he went immediately out into his vehicle and used an FBI apparatus, a communications device, a pad, I guess, and then recorded it all. And then subsequently, when he was fired, he leaked that. So the FBI, and for a variety of reasons, this is just one of the very minor ones, but for a variety of ongoing reasons, whether it's missing FBI phones during the Mueller investigation or Mueller staggering, the ex-FBI head, staggering the dismissals of Strzok and Page, so there didn't seem to be any connection between them, and they were reassigned rather than fired for their unprofessionalism, or James Baker talking to sources and probably leaking it to Yahoo or other sources right before the 2016 election. And then we have Kevin Kleinsmith submitting a fraudulent doctored document. So we could go on, but there's something existentially wrong with the FBI. And I don't know if it's confined to the Washington echelon, but they seem to be an extension of the progressive movement or the DNC or whatever Democratic administration is in power. And they don't seem to, when you look at what they have done with the Hunter laptop, they had that in their possession. They sat on it. Mm-hmm. And they didn't come out because they were pressured because of the campaign. The election was approaching in 2020. And then they kind of had more performance art with James O'Keefe, who hasn't been charged yet for all of the publicity that seems to have been provided to the New York Times that almost immediately aired that story. So I don't know what to make of it, because we all have respect for our investigatory agencies. But I think it's a larger trend that all of us that are traditionals, who have traditionally supported the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, the Pentagon, they have lost the support of half the country. And it's not just me, pontificating. If you look at the latest poll, the Pentagon, only 45% in a recent Reagan Library poll expressed confidence in the military. When you look at the polls of the FBI, it's even more dismal. And when you have people like James Comey 245 times saying he can't remember while under oath, or Andrew McCabe on 3 occasions lying under oath to federal investigators, or John Brennan on 2 occasions lying under oath about the CIA tapping into Senate computers, or that drone operations did not have any collateral damage, or James Clapper lying under oath. And he said that I gave the least untruthful answer when he said the NSA doesn't spy on people. Or Adam Schiff, the same thing. And so this is all a narrative that we've lost confidence in what were very traditional American institutions.
This all appears in a John Durham motion in support of alleging conflicts of interest in the case. So there haven't been new indictments handed down, but there absolutely could be. Trump, known for his hyperbole on a lot of issues, may not be wrong when he says this is worse than Watergate. I mean, if this pans out, if she and her campaign were actively spying on the sitting president, on his campaign for president, then on the sitting president, and working to create dirt that would possibly bring him down, she definitely could be facing criminal charges, she or whoever they can actually pin it on. And this would be an enormous, enormous ethical and legal breach. We're not there yet, but that's what's being alleged. Essentially, we'll see the names filled in. But just by way of info, Victor, back in 2016, people are now pulling up her old tweets, and it was October 31st, 2016, right before the election. She tweets out, "Computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert server linking the Trump organization to a Russian-based bank." Oh, which computer sciences are those, Hillary? Right? I mean, now we're getting a better picture. Then she shared a statement from her campaign's then senior policy advisor, Jake Sullivan. He's now national security advisor, this guy, saying as follows. Just a couple highlights from what he was saying. They're stoking the fire. This is the point I'm going for. "This could be the most direct link yet between Donald Trump and Moscow. Secret hotline may be the key to unlocking the mystery of Trump's ties to Russia. It raises even more troubling questions in light of Russia's masterminding of hacking efforts that are clearly intended to hurt Hillary Clinton's campaign. Hello, pot, meet kettle." And here's the last one. "Can only assume federal authorities will now explore this direct connection." Oh, really? You can only assume that? "Can only assume federal authorities will now explore this direct connection between Trump and Russia as part of their existing probe into Russia's meddling in our elections." Meanwhile, the Clinton campaign lawyer Sussman is in there telling the FBI, "I've unearthed it. This is the thing. You've got to look into it. No, I have no client. It's not the Hillary Clinton campaign. I'm just a good citizen." And now we know all this other stuff was happening behind the scenes. This is criminal, Victor.
It is criminal. And it begs the question, why did Hillary Clinton have such confidence that she could make these statements publicly when privately she knows she had some exposure? I think the answer is that she had a series of Clintonites that were seated deeply within the Obama administration. And we can see what Bruce Orr was doing at the time she was talking. He was seeding the dossier and talking to people in the Justice Department. Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton had been meeting on that tarmac, and about what, I don't know, probably the Hillary Clinton email investigations. That was kept quiet. At the same time, Andrew McCabe was point man on the investigation while his wife was running for office in Virginia and getting Clinton-related PAC money from Terry McAuliffe's PAC. And the second thing was that this had been habitual for her, Megan. Remember the Uranium One scandal where she and the State Department committee had pretty much allowed 20% of North American uranium to fall in the hands of Russia at a time when Bill Clinton had been given $500,000 to speak on just one occasion in Moscow, and when there were a lot of multi-million-dollar gifts to the Clinton administration from Russian-related sources. And then we had, of course, the missing email scandal, and then we had the Steele dossier scandal. And I don't know what to make of it. Maybe you do. And it's either one of two things, that this repeated violation of ethical and probably legal statutes, then it emboldens her and she says, well, if they didn't get me for that, then they won't get me for this and they won't get me for this. And she just becomes more emboldened, or it starts to erode her credibility. And at some point, people are so embarrassed, they say, this can't go on. She's just so flaunting the law that let's stop it. I don't know what will happen, but no other political figure in our generation has so deliberately and ostentatiously broken the law, in my opinion.
You know, they say, and I've talked to convicted felons about this, crossing the first ethical line is the hardest. And once you've done that, you're pretty much good. You know, it's sort of, once you sort of abandon the commitment to following an ethical code, and that's the biggest move. And then you're on the other side and it's a party. You know, it's like whatever you want, carte blanche.
I think you're right, especially when she said, I mean, she went around for most of 2016 suggesting that I shouldn't say suggesting, explicitly saying Donald Trump was not legitimately elected. They had all of those people, celebrities, grade B celebrities, making those commercials to reject the electors and have them defy their constitutional duty and reject Trump. And then almost immediately she said she was part of the resistance, she said. And then when Joe Biden, in the closing days of the campaign, she suggested to him not to accept the results of the election if he lost. And then she, of course, during Trump's administration, said he was illegitimately elected. What I'm getting at is that there's this psychological mechanism of projection. She seems to project Russian collusion when she's using Russian-related sources herself. She seems to suggest that it's dishonest, and it is, and it's probably illegitimate to question a sanctioned U.S. election, but that's what she does all the time, sort of like Stacey Abrams. And then finally, we all feel that Trump goes over the top. He's paranoid. He makes these outlandish statements. But if you or I or any of us in our own profession had been subject to what he was subject to, where they tried to destroy his campaign by the use of a fake Russian-related dossier, and a discredited British spy who's not supposed as a foreign national to participate, and then Hillary Clinton through 3 firewalls, the DNC, Perkins Coie, and GPS, was funneling dirt against Trump. They tapped Michael Flynn's communications, and we're going to charge him with archaic statues that somehow he was communicating during the transition with foreign leaders, which they all do. And then we went right into Mueller for 22 months, found nothing. And then we went into Ukraine, and in light of what's happened to Ukraine and what's in light of what the Biden family revelations are about Ukraine, that first impeachment seemed very dubious. So I don't think any president has been subject to such an array of illicit and non-enough attacks as Trump. Mm-hmm. But because he's so controversial himself, he doesn't benefit from sympathy that's accorded to someone that's been on the receiving end of such illegal activity.
I'm thinking right now of the election fraud claims, which, none of which he was able to sustain in court. But a fair amount of Republicans believe that the election was stolen. And this story kind of helps you understand how they got there. If you're paying attention to anything that's not mainstream, because the mainstream buries this story and any stories about Durham, or they mock Durham, you think it's a joke, you think it's made up, you don't think Hillary spied on Donald at all, and you think he's some sort of weird conspiracy theorist who, whenever anything bad happens to him, he just blames, sort of some boogeyman, whether it's Hillary or somebody else or Comey. But these things actually happened. Her campaign, there's an indictment alleging that her campaign was up to no good and trying to create this connection. Even before today, we knew that. Not to mention all the things you listed, Carter Page ruining his life and so on. And then you get to the election and Trump is saying, no, I'm telling you, they stole it. And a lot of these people who have seen him proven right time and time again and been told by the media, don't be so stupid, there's no way, are like, we're not listening to you anymore.
Yeah, and that's not your impression or my impression. Remember that notorious Time magazine article where they were bragging that Mark Zuckerberg had injected $419 million in pre-selected precincts in swing states, and they really absorbed the role and the job of state registrar employees. They kind of took it over, and they added more mailboxes. They went out and harvested votes. But the point of that article was they used the word conspiracy, as in good conspiracy. We had a good conspiracy of changing the election laws in key states, A, and then they said, B, we injected multi-million dollars in swing state precincts. And what I thought was the most disturbing was they said that we were able to modulate the demonstrations, i.e. Antifa and BLM, all of a sudden in August and September and October started to taper off that 120 days. That was really getting the middle class swing voter very upset. And they admitted in kind of a braggadocio article that this is what they were doing. And yet if anybody on the right or center had written that article, they would have been called a conspiracist. But they were so arrogant and haughty after the Biden win. They were bragging how they just manipulated with the help of money, and they cited people in the street, demonstrators, and the CEOs. And so
it's amazing because I used to consume my information and say, all right, well, I know where not to go. I'm not going to go on Reddit to get my info as a news person. I'm going to take in sources from the far left and the far right and the center left and the center right and just sort of make up my own mind about where the truth is. And now it's almost as if I'm getting to the point where I feel like I need to avoid the mainstream altogether. It's just, they look at YouTube as though it's full of disinformation. I look at them that way.
Yeah, I do too. I go back to 2016 when Trump got the nomination, and then during the campaign, and right after the election of 2016. Jim Rutenberg of the New York Times, Jorge Ramos of Univision, Christian Amanpour of CNN, they all had the same narrative that traditional journalism could no longer sustain itself because Donald Trump posed such an existential threat to the election process, to global warming, to the border, and all of them had a different take, but they had the same conclusion that journalists must be activists. And that was replicated by the ACLU, said the same thing almost. And so we entered a new era of journalism that they were going to be activists, and the data showed it. Remember the Shorenstein Center at Harvard in the first 90 days said that the mainstream media, as well as cable news, was 93% negative of the Trump administration. They'd never seen anything approximating that. So I think a lot of people just said the media by choice, and you can see it with CNN, especially its implosion, decided to be an arm of the progressive movement, and they kind of turned off. And it's disturbing because, as I get older, I'm 68 years old, and all of these institutions that we all used to think were apolitical, the corporation, Wall Street, social media, Silicon Valley, K through 12. We knew the university was, but entertainment, Hollywood, they've all become biased in the sense that they don't believe because they think their ends are so noble or morally superior to everybody that any means necessary, even if it disrupts their professional code, is okay and it's justified. There's not going to be anybody who apologizes about this Alpha Bank episode. They're just like Christopher Steele is unrepentant. So is Mark
they just bury it. They bury it and it goes away unless you seek out alternative media, unless you turn off CNN and try to find yourself a Fox, which most Democrats, they are watching it, but sort of the hardcore believers, maybe not. And so the people who need to get the information about what she did, allegedly, aren't getting it. Okay, there's a lot more to go over. I've got to talk to you about your piece, Our Elite is No Elite at All. I was thinking about it last night as I watched sort of the crowd shots at the Super Bowl and who's who of, celebrity and political culture. And you've got to hear what Victor Davis Hanson has to say on that. Don't go away. That's up next.